She's delusional. She lives in a basement apartment and thinks she can take us to court. That's what my mother said about me on a speakerphone call I was never supposed to hear. My sister's husband had pocket-dialed me from the kitchen counter at my parents' house in Oakville, and for 3 minutes and 47 seconds, I listened to my entire family discuss how pathetic I was. My father laughed. My sister said nothing to stop it. And my mother, the woman who used to braid my hair every morning before school, said, honestly, if she disappeared tomorrow, would anything change? I saved that voicemail. I still have it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually began. The Saturday morning my daughter turned 6 and nobody came. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm a single mother living in Hamilton, Ontario, and for 3 years after my divorce, I believed that keeping the peace with my family was more important than keeping my dignity. I bent. I apologized for things I didn't do. I drove an hour and a half to Oakville every other Sunday so my daughter, Emmy, could see her grandparents, her aunt, her uncle. I packed the car with her little overnight bag, her stuffed bunny she couldn't sleep without, a box of my mother's favorite high-end tea because I thought it mattered. Every single time, my ex-husband, Craig, left when Emmy was 2. He'd met someone at a conference in Montreal, younger, no kid, uncomplicated. He told me on a Tuesday evening while I was warming up Emmy's bottle. I think we both know this isn't working, he said, like he was canceling a gym membership. He moved to Vancouver 3 weeks later and started contesting child support within the month. The court ordered him to pay. He paid late, then less, then not at all. My family's reaction to the divorce was the first crack. My mother called me the night Craig left, and instead of asking if I was okay, she asked what I'd done wrong. Men don't just leave, Nadine, she said, using my sister's name by accident. Or maybe not by accident. My sister, Jocelyn, had always been the name on the tip of my mother's tongue. Jocelyn was 3 years younger and had married Victor, a real estate developer from North York whose family owned commercial properties across the GTA. Victor wore watches that cost more than my car. My parents loved Victor the way you love a lottery ticket that keeps paying out, so when Craig left me, the family math was simple. Jocelyn's stock went up. Mine went down. For 3 years, I worked as a data analyst at a mid-size firm in downtown Hamilton. That's what my family knew. What they didn't know was that I'd been building something else on the side. Something that started as a personal project during maternity leave and grew into a forensic data consultancy that provincial regulators and federal agencies had started quietly contracting. I had a team of 11 people working remotely. I had contracts with FinTrack. I had a client list that would have made Victor's jaw go slack. But I never told my family any of this, because every time I tried to share good news, my mother would find a way to redirect the conversation to Jocelyn. So I stopped sharing. I just built. The day Emmy turned 6 was October 14th, a Saturday. I'd planned a small party at our apartment. Nothing extravagant, just streamers, a homemade cake, a bouncy castle I'd rented from a company in Stony Creek. I'd invited my parents, Jocelyn, Victor, and their 2 boys. Emmy had been counting the days on a little paper chain she'd made at school, tearing off 1 link every morning. She woke up that day and ran to the chain and ripped off the last link and screamed, "It's today, Mama! Everyone's coming today." By noon, I'd gotten 2 texts. My mother, "Something came up. Jocelyn's boys have a hockey tournament in Mississauga. We're all going. Rain check on the party, sweetheart." Jocelyn, "Nothing." Radio silence. I called my father. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. I called my mother. She picked up and I could hear arena noise in the background. "Can't really talk, the boys are about to go on. We'll do something next weekend, okay?" "Emmy won't even notice." Emmy noticed. She stood at the window in her birthday dress, this lavender thing with a tulle skirt she picked out herself at the Value Village on Barton Street, and watched the driveway. "When are Grandma and Grandpa coming?" she asked at 1 o'clock. "Are they lost?" She asked it too. By 3, she was sitting on the couch with her bunny, very quiet, and she looked at me with those wide brown eyes and said, "Mama, did they forget me?" I have never in my life felt a rage that clean. It wasn't hot. It was cold. It was perfectly still. It was a door locking shut inside my chest, and I knew, sitting there in that apartment with the bouncy castle inflating for nobody in the backyard, that I was done. I didn't cry. I cut the cake. I put on Emmy's favorite movie. I sat beside her and ate 2 slices and told her she was the most important person in the world. She fell asleep against my shoulder around 7, still in the lavender dress, and I carried her to bed and tucked the bunny under her arm and stood in her doorway for a long time. Then I sat at my kitchen table, and I did something very deliberate. I opened my laptop. I wrote a single email to my mother, my father, and Jocelyn. The subject line was Emmy's birthday. The body contained 1 sentence: "I've enclosed a gift for each of you. Consider it my last contribution to this family." Attached was a scanned image of a $1 bill, a single loonie I'd photographed on my kitchen counter. I hit send at 11:14 p.m., and I closed the laptop and I went to bed. The next morning, my phone had 9 missed calls. My mother had left 3 voicemails, each one escalating. The first was confused. The second was offended. The third was furious. "I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but you do not send your parents $1 like we're beggars. You've always had a problem with gratitude. Jocelyn would never." Jocelyn texted, "Mom's really upset. Can you just apologize so this doesn't ruin Thanksgiving?" My father sent nothing. He never did. He was the kind of man who let my mother speak for both of them and then acted surprised when things fell apart. I didn't respond to any of them. Not that day, not that week, not for 3 months. The silence drove them insane. What happened during those 3 months is where the story splits. My life was getting better, and theirs was getting worse, and neither side knew about the other. On my end, I landed the biggest contract of my career. A crown corporation had flagged a massive internal fraud. Someone had been funneling procurement funds through shell companies for over a decade, and my firm was brought in to trace the money. The contract was worth more than everything I'd earned in the previous 2 years combined. I hired 4 new analysts. I moved Emmy and me out of the basement apartment into a townhouse in Dundas with a yard and a school within walking distance. Emmy got her own room for the first time. She picked out curtains with little foxes on them. I hung them myself. On their end, Victor's real estate empire was collapsing. I didn't know this at the time. I found out later, in pieces, the way you find out anything in a family that treats information like currency. Victor had over-leveraged on a condo development in Vaughan. The project stalled. His lenders called in their loans. He'd been using my parents' retirement savings, money my father had accumulated over 32 years as a millwright at Delfasco, as collateral for a bridge loan without telling them the full risk. When the project collapsed, the money went with it. $380,000. Gone. My parents found out in January, right around the time my mother was leaving me those furious voicemails about a $1 bill. But here's the thing about my family. When Victor lost their money, they didn't blame Victor. They blamed the market. They blamed the city for pulling permits. They blamed the interest rates. Because admitting Victor was reckless would mean admitting Jocelyn had married reckless, and that was a crack in the foundation my mother could not afford. So instead, they came to me. It started with Jocelyn calling on a Wednesday night in February, the first time she'd called me directly in 4 months. "Hey," she said, her voice doing that thing it does when she wants something, soft, slightly higher than normal. "I know things have been weird. I miss you. Mom misses you. Can we just get together?" I said sure. I suggested coffee in Burlington, neutral ground. She agreed. We met at a cafe near the waterfront. It was freezing. February in Hamilton, the wind coming off the lake like it's trying to punish you for living there. Jocelyn looked different. Thinner, more makeup than usual. A new coat that still had the tag tucked inside the collar. She hugged me. She asked about Emmy. She told me she was sorry about the birthday and that she'd felt terrible ever since. Then, 17 minutes in, I know because I checked my phone afterward, she said, "So Victor's been having some trouble with a project, and Mom and Dad are kind of caught up in it, and we were wondering if maybe you could help out. Just temporarily. Like a loan." "How much?" I asked. She looked at her coffee. 80,000 to start. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd driven an hour to sit across from my sister and be asked for $80,000 by a family that couldn't drive 30 minutes to attend my daughter's birthday. "I'll think about it," I said. I paid for both coffees. I drove home. That night, my mother called. No pretense this time. "Your sister told me you're doing well. That's wonderful. We need help. Victor made some mistakes. But he's family now, and family helps family. Your father is devastated. He can't sleep. Did Dad ask you to call?" I said. Silence. "Tell Dad to call me himself if he wants to talk." He never called. Over the next 6 weeks, the requests escalated. Jocelyn sent me a text that said, "Victor says if he can get 120 Tay by April, he can save the Vaughn project and pay Mom and Dad back within the year." Victor himself called me. First time he'd ever dialed my number and pitched it like a business opportunity. "I just need a bridge, that's all." "I'm good for it. You know I'm good for it." I asked him what collateral he was offering. He laughed like I'd made a joke. I asked again. He stopped laughing. My mother escalated to emotional warfare. "Your father is talking about selling the house you grew up in, and you're sitting on money doing nothing. How do you sleep at night?" "I sleep fine. I sleep in a townhouse in Dundas with my daughter in the room next door, with fox curtains and a stuffed bunny and the knowledge that nobody in this family gave a single thought to her on October 14th. I said no, queerly, firmly, once. That's when things got ugly. Craig, my ex-husband, the one who hadn't paid child support in 11 months, suddenly filed a motion in family court for full custody of Emmy. He claimed I was emotionally unstable and financially reckless, and that Emmy would be better off with him in Vancouver. He'd never shown interest in custody before. He'd missed 3 scheduled video calls in a row. He once forgot her birthday entirely, not even a card. I knew immediately that someone had put him up to it. The filing was done through a law firm in Toronto that Victor had used before. The retainer was paid by an account I later traced to my parents. My family funded my ex-husband's attempt to take my daughter. Let me say that again, because I need you to understand the kind of people we're dealing with. My mother and father took money. They were desperate to recover and used part of it to pay a lawyer to try to remove my child from my home, because I refused to write a check to bail out my sister's husband. I found out about the custody motion on a Thursday afternoon. I picked Emmy up from school, made her dinner, read her 2 chapters of a book about a fox who builds a house in the woods. She fell asleep. I sat on the floor outside her bedroom door and I cried for about 10 minutes. Then I stopped. I washed my face. I sat at my kitchen table and I called my lawyer. My lawyer's name is Rhonda Chen. She's a family law specialist out of Burlington. She's 5'2", and she has the energy of someone who bench presses injustice for fun. When I told her what was happening, she was quiet for about 15 seconds, then said, "We're not just going to win this, we're going to make sure they never try it again." Rhonda filed a counter-motion within 72 hours. She subpoenaed Craig's financial records, which showed 11 months of unpaid child support totaling over $14,000. She pulled his travel records, which showed he'd been to 4 countries in the past year, but not once to Ontario to see his daughter. She filed a motion to compel disclosure on the retainer payment, which led directly to Victor's account, which led directly to my parents. But the part that changed everything was what happened in the courtroom. The hearing was in April at the Superior Court of Justice in Hamilton. My parents came. They sat in the gallery behind Craig like a support section at a hockey game. My mother wore her good navy blazer. My father stared at his shoes. Jocelyn didn't come. Later I heard she was too ashamed, which is the first decent instinct she'd shown in years. Craig's lawyer, a sharp-looking man from that Toronto firm, stood up and made his case. He said I was unstable. He said I was unstable. He said I had alienated Emmy from her father. He said I was living beyond my means, and it was only a matter of time before the house of cards collapsed. Rhonda let him finish. She didn't interrupt once. When it was her turn, she stood up and placed a single binder on the table. Then she said, "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit A through Exhibit R." 18 exhibits. Craig's missed support payments. Craig's travel records. Victor's financial collapse. The retainer payment trace. Text messages from my mother pressuring me to hand over money. A forensic timeline showing the custody filing came exactly 9 days after I refused the loan. And then, Exhibit R, a detailed dossier on my consultancy, my client list, my contracts, my revenue statements, my tax filings for the past 3 years. Craig's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. The judge reviewed the materials. Then she looked at Craig's lawyer and said, "And I will remember this for the rest of my life. Counsel, are you aware of who your opposing party is?" He looked confused. "Your client's former wife," the judge continued, "operates one of the leading forensic data consultancies retained by federal agencies in this country. She traces financial fraud for a living, and your client's family decided to commit financial fraud against her." She paused. "I want to make sure I understand the strategy here." My mother's face went white. I watched it happen from across the courtroom, not red, white, like all the blood just left. The judge dismissed Craig's custody motion in its entirety. She ordered immediate enforcement of all outstanding child support plus interest. She referred the retainer payment arrangement to the Law Society for investigation into potential champroderty, and she issued a costs order against Craig personally for what she called a vexatious and retaliatory filing designed to punish the respondent for exercising her right to refuse a financial demand. Craig didn't look at me once. He stared at the table. His lawyer started packing up before the judge was even finished. But the moment I keep coming back to, the one that sits in my chest like a stone I don't want to put down, happened after, outside the courtroom in that gray hallway with the fluorescent lights and the vending machine that never works. My father stopped me. He looked old. Older than he should have. He was wearing his DeFasco jacket, the one with the fraying cuffs, and his hands were shaking. He said, "I didn't know. About the lawyer. About what your mother did. I didn't know." I looked at him for a long time. "You didn't know," I said, "or you didn't ask." He didn't answer. He just stood there with his shaking hands and his fraying jacket and 32 years of silence. I walked past him. I got in my car. I drove to Emmy's school, and I picked her up, and she ran to me in the parking lot and grabbed my legs and said, "Mama, can we get Timbits?" And I said, "Yes, baby, we can get Timbits." And I held it together until she was in the back seat with the box, and I turned the music up and I let 2 tears fall. Just 2, and then I was done. The aftermath came in waves. Craig's lawyer withdrew from the case. Craig stopped contesting support and the arrears were garnished from his wages by the Family Responsibility Office. He hasn't filed another motion since. He sends Emmy a card at Christmas now, which is more than he did before, and less than she deserves. Victor's Vaughn project went into receivership. He lost everything. The properties, the North York portfolio, the watches. He and Jocelyn moved into a rental in Brampton. My parents had to sell the Oakville house. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo in Grimsby. My mother, who used to host dinner parties for 16 people in a dining room with crown molding, now microwaves soup in a galley kitchen. 3 months after the hearing, Jocelyn sent me a long email, 12 paragraphs. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't known about the custody thing either. She said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. She asked how Emmy was. At the end, she wrote, "I should have come to the birthday party. I should have come to every birthday party. I don't know how to fix that." I read it twice. I didn't respond for 2 weeks. Then I wrote back, "You can't fix it, but you can start showing up." She came to Emmy's 7th birthday. She brought a cake she'd baked herself. Lopsided, too much icing, the letters crooked. Emmy loved it. They built a blanket fort together in the living room. Jocelyn cried in my kitchen afterward and said she was sorry again. And I let her, and I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. But I handed her a tissue and I poured her more coffee. My parents have not reached out. My mother, I'm told, through Jocelyn, maintains that I destroyed the family. My father, I'm told, says nothing. Which is exactly what he's always done. Some nights after Emmy is asleep and the townhouse is quiet and the foxes on the curtains are just little shapes in the dark, I sit on the back deck with a cup of tea and think about that Saturday in October. The bouncy castle, the lavender dress, the paper chain with no links left. I think about my daughter asking if they'd forgotten her, and I think about the fact that the answer was yes. They had. They chose a hockey tournament and a con man's ego over a 6-year-old girl blowing out candles. And I think about that dollar bill, the one I photographed on my kitchen counter and emailed to the people who were supposed to love me. It was petty, I know that, but it was also the first honest thing I'd said to them in 3 years. Here's what I know now. Standing on the other side of it all, you don't owe anyone your loyalty when they've already abandoned yours. You don't owe your parents forgiveness just because they gave you a childhood. You don't owe your sister silence just because she's blood. The only person I owed anything to was the little girl in the lavender dress, and I paid that debt in full. Emmy is 8 now. She starts grade 3 in September at a school she loves, with friends she chose, in a house that belongs to us. She still has the bunny. She still watches for cars in the driveway sometimes, but less and less. And when she asks about Grandma and Grandpa, I tell her the truth in the gentlest way I can. Some people aren't ready to love you the way you deserve, but I am, and I always will be. Last month, she made a paper chain for the days until summer vacation. 42 links, each one a different color. She tears one off every morning and counts what's left and bounces out the door. She doesn't wait at the window anymore, and neither do I.